So we have to devise these sort of fundamental mechanisms that we insist upon, that there can be no virus without vaccine, that there have to be routine ways for lies to be stopped. And that is an existential threat to surveillance capitalism, and therefore we go back to the foundations here of addressing the economic logic, and that's going to cover the sexual assault in the social network, as well as the political assaults in the social network. All of these are captured by the same economic contradiction.
Thank you very much. Next up, we'll go to Morocco for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first of all thank you, organizers and co-organizers, for making of this meeting the event that it is today. I've been attentive, following the precious and valuable interventions, which were all trying to convey some ideas and thoughts regarding protection of personal data on the one hand, and the correlation between this protection and democracy, which is ultimately the core of the topic. Needless to remind you that violating private lives is shaking, if not jeopardizing, our democratic choices. That is, the detention of personal data by certain actors, be they state actors or trade actors, renders our democracies vulnerable and subject to manipulation. And today, whether we like it or not, ourselves, we all become nomophobic to the extent that this reminds me of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We become victims of our machines. And I've heard Shoshana speaking of the failure of legislators to devise laws and enforce frameworks. Galileo once said, you cannot teach a man everything. You can only help him discover it within himself. And I guess this is what we need to grasp today more than ever before, beyond the restrictions, beyond the laws, and beyond the regulations. So don't you think, this is my question is directed to Shoshana, that it's an ethical question? And nobody can legislate on ethics. But what is frightening today is the more it says, the more it's going to be hard to handle. So how would you react to that? Thank you.
This is such a wonderful question. I realized I didn't have time this morning to share this with you, but it's in my written statement. But there's a fascinating story here about a U.S. Senate subcommittee that was convened in 1971, chaired by a famous senator, Sam Ervin, who was one of the Watergate senators who defended democracy in that crisis. And it was a bipartisan committee, everyone from the arch conservative Strom Thurmond to Ted Kennedy. It was convened around the subject of behavioral modification, because behavioral modification had been imported from the Cold War into civil society and was now being used in schools and hospitals, in prisons, in all kinds of institutions of captive populations. And Sam Ervin wrote the conclusion for this committee. And he said that behavioral modification fundamentally undermines individual sovereignty. It robs people of autonomy. And without individual sovereignty and without autonomy, there can be no freedom. And without freedom, there can be no democracy. The outcome of 4 years of deliberation on that subcommittee was to eliminate all federal funding for behavioral modification programs, right? That was in the 1970s. I think of the 1970s as 5 minutes ago, right? Those were some of the best years of my life. It wasn't that long ago, right? So now they're talking about aiming this at these institutions, bounded organizations. Here we are, 2019, and we have global architectures of behavioral modification backed by trillions of dollars of capital. And where is the outrage? Where is the moral compass? Where is the response within us, as you say, that says this cannot stand? This is inimical to everything that our societies are founded on. And so I agree with you. Part of our challenge now is to get over the ideologies of the last 4 decades that have belittled government, that have belittled the state, that have denied regulation as an assault on freedom, to understand, as I said before, that these companies know too much to qualify for freedom. We need to only democracy. Survey everything on the horizon. Only democracy, which means only you, have the power and the capability and the tools to intervene on this process before it is too late. Just one tiny little comment about something that was said earlier. It won't be done in a year. I think you brought this up, Mr. Kent, the time frame. This kind of change, this kind of structural transformation, it is not the work of a day or a month or a year, but it can be done in 5 years. And maybe in 5 years, and certainly in the next decade, we have a horizon to shift the Titanic. We have the time and the capabilities to do that. What we need, as you've just said, we need to get in touch again with our moral bearings. They are there, and we should not be intimidated.
Thank you, Mrs. Zuboff. Next up, we'll go